Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of YHB TV. That's your Handmade Business Television, a weekly series that Sharon and I do with live video dedicated to helping you navigate all things #MakerLife. I'm Isaac Watson, along with Sharon here, my crafty co-conspirator. And though maybe not on this side, maybe she's on this side. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We collectively are the directors of Academy of Handmade, a supportive community for makers. Each week on this show, we tackle a topic that we think gets a little bit deeper into what's really going on in your handmade business and take questions. And sometimes we have guests and just generally have a lot of casual, approachable fun. So this week...
Why, it sounds like a dating profile. Like, I'm
casual yet approachable.
Like, yeah, have some casual, approachable fun. No big deal.
Oh my God. Anyway, this week we are talking about the casual, approachable subject of customer service, and specifically about some of the ways that your customers aren't always right all the time, as well as some things that you can do about it. And I'm really excited to talk about this because there's this notion that big box retail has built into our psyche that says the customer is always right. And that's not true when it comes to handmade business. So we're going to dive into that. But first,
okay. Well, Isaac didn't mention it, but also he mentioned guests. So I wanted to say, if you didn't catch last week's, we had two really awesome guests. And we talked about, was that last week, Manufacturing Spool Town?
Yeah, that was Dana and Sarah. That was last week.
I feel like it was longer than
I'm with you. It feels like it was like 3 weeks ago.
We really combined a lot of stuff in between these last weeks. So, yeah, we talked with the ladies of Spool Town, and it was amazing. Like, they talked about manufacturing and what you need to do to get ready to have any part of your process manufactured. So yeah, you'll want to check that out. It's up above. You can catch it later. You can see the replay for this whole last month up there. I did want to talk about briefly, before we move on to the topic of the customer is not always right. I wanted to talk about State of Making. And this is our third annual State of Making. It is a 2-day free virtual summit, basically, where we talk to experts and makers, veteran makers just like you, about their business and what's happened in the last year and lessons they've learned. And we do it by a few different topics. And so I wanted to just share with you guys a little bit about that. On day one, Thursday, May 3rd, we're going to talk about the maker economy. And we have Marlo Mayashiro, who runs a retail space called the Handmade Showroom, which features Seattle area makers. And we're going to also have maker Sarah Mandel of Once Again Sam to talk. This is kind of just like a brief recap and overview of like, where are things at? Is it viable to still be a maker? What's happening? Some big picture trends. So that is that. The next session, same day, May 3rd at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, 2:30 Eastern. We're going to talk about being the CEO and what it means to take the maker hat off, I guess, and I am the business owner hat on. And we have two people that are really amazing. Janet LeBlanc of Paper and Spark, who works with people on their bookkeeping and accounting. She's a CPA, as well as Katie Hunt, who's really amazing in like all aspects. She does trade show boot camp, so she knows all about wholesale, but she has run her own stationery business, and she kind of has like some really good takes on making those smart business decisions and being the business person, and understanding what that calling the shots like that means. In our third session that day, we're going to do digital strategy and social media. And we have Annika Chaloff of Hey Mavens and Married and Brights, who she just has really great branding, has experimented with video, has a Facebook group. Like, I think she is just diving in very smartly to lots of stuff in that space. And then Jennifer Priest, who is a blogger and also runs something called Smart Creative Social. She does basically like consulting and education around digital and online strategy for creative businesses. So that is the day 1 lineup. There's 3 sessions. The day 2 lineup, we're talking about Etsy. Yay, everyone's favorite topic. We have Amanda Siska of Bread and Badger, who is a prolific Etsy seller. And then Jennifer Gillespie Young. She runs the Idea Box Kids, and she is the Etsy wholesale admin. So she has a lot of interesting perspective on like the whole being on Etsy situation too. And I'm really excited to talk with both of them. The next session that day is Etsy Alternatives. So basically everything from online shop to, other marketplaces. Mostly we're going to be exploring Amazon Handmade. Elizabeth Rappa of Forgotten Cotton basically had her business take off this year on Amazon Handmade, and it eclipsed Etsy in sales for her. And if you know about her business, she is a very strong Etsy seller. She is usually like one of the top Etsy seller in her category. And so that's a pretty big deal for Amazon Handmade to take over. And then Ariane Folks of Aolydia, who helps creatives build their website. She's going to be talking as well too. And then our last session, the coup de grace, I guess in many ways, is wholesale. We're talking about everything from trade shows to the landscape and wholesale. And we've got Adrienne Wiley of Frolic. Her shop is called Frolic. And she's the author of Adventures in Wholesale. She runs a retail shop and has her own maker business. And then Stacia Guzzo, who started out as a just kind of, I don't want to it's just a very small, petite handmade business with handcrafted honeybee. And she's really scaled it up through doing like trade shows and being very aggressive in her branding. We discussed her branding overview, her branding redo. Like she just made a lot of decisions, and a lot of them were regarding wholesale to sort of, get bigger. And she's done a ton of trade shows this last year too. So she's handcrafted honeybee, and I think you're going to really enjoy what she has to say. So if you go to academyofhandmade.com/the state of making, you will find all of the information there. So
awesome. Is that the button? The button too?
Yes, the button here below, the call to action button, says state of making. It'll take you directly to the Crowdcast to sign up there.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, before we dive in, I do want to call it that we have a poll again this week. You know how we love our polls. So we would love to know what your relationship with customer service is, and we'll check in on that later. So go ahead and click on the poll button. You should see a little badge next to it, and you can fill that out and let us know. All right. So, of course, I didn't mention, and I should, that if you are new to Crowdcast and you're not sure how this whole platform works, you've got the chat on the right-hand side, and you can ask a question down below the video on the Ask a Question section. Pop in your questions there, and we'll cover them at the end. Okay, without further ado, the customer is not always right. So first, we want to talk about some of the ways that customers may not be right. And this may go a little counter to some of the ways that you may have been trained that the customer is always right. And so I think it's important to review these things, especially from a handmade business owner perspective, because we want you to know that that isn't the case. The customer is not always right. And that'll help us understand some of the ways that you can address that, which we'll dive into in a little bit. So here are 5 ways that the customer may not actually be right. A, they don't read completely. People are notoriously bad at reading things, and they don't read policies. They don't read email communications. They don't read shipping notifications. people are just bad at reading because there's so much coming at us all the time in our lives, right? I mean, my inbox blows up left and right and left and right, whether it's email subscriptions or people reaching out about it. Like, it's crazy how much communication we get. So a lot of people just don't have the bandwidth to read completely. So that may be one reason that they're not right, is because they just weren't paying attention and they didn't read the words that you tried to communicate to them. Number 2 is that
I like that you started with A and now we're on to 2.
Yeah, I'm going to Roman numeral 3 next. Number 2, they may have bad taste, or they may be trying to impose their taste on your products. So the thing to remember here is that taste is subjective. Number 3, Roman numeral 3, or letter C, whatever you want to call it. The third thing, they might be trying to pin third-party mistakes on you as the maker. So let's say the post office damages something, or they have a complaint about whatever payment platform you're using, or something like that. Because you're the one that's accessible to them more so than a big behemoth like the USPS or Etsy or whatnot, they may come back to you to try and pin those mistakes on you. And it may be unwitting. It's not necessarily deliberate or intentional, but that's just something that happens sometimes. The fourth thing that we wanted to bring up is that customers sometimes have unreasonable expectations, or they haven't communicated their expectations properly. And that can always lead to an issue with where their expectations aren't met, but you didn't know that, or they just have ridiculous expectations that there's no way you could meet them, whether that's price or quality or things like that, whatever it is. Lastly, the last reason that a customer may not be right is kind of what I've just led into, which is price. Unreasonable expectations about price, specifically around handmade items. If you've got a customer who's used to shopping at Walmart for most of their stuff, and then they are digging for something on Etsy, or they're Googling around and they find your online shop on your website, they may not fully comprehend the value of handmade. And so they may be setting unreal expectations for you around price because they don't hold that value. So those are some of the reasons that customers may not be right. Now let's talk about how to deal with it, because that's the most important thing.
Yes. So the first way is obviously don't take it personally. Easier said than done, especially when this business is your business. So it all feels kind of personal. So it's a few strategies to deal with that, because I think it's, like I said, it's easier said than done. Using canned responses, especially for like transactional or like FAQ items, to strip emotion out of it. So anytime somebody has a question or is responding to something in a certain way, just have like, a document that's like a little swipe file, and you just copy and paste in and answer their questions that way, or slightly modify it in order to answer their question. As some people also like to invent assistants for themselves. And I think this can be, this charade, if you will, can be a great way to put yourself into someone else's brain space by like having this name, like, oh, this is just your customer support Linda helping them. It's not actually you, or this is, some other, whoever. This is like, oh, I'll just refer you to customer support. And that's the, the person that is talking, and it's a way for you to sort of like, this isn't me talking, this is them talking. And so that's a way to, literally like distance yourself from it, I guess. Like the person on the other end will no longer, pin that on you, I guess. Can blame your employee, Susan, or whoever.
For sure. So in one of the various things that I do that is not Academy of Handmade is I do customer support emails for my husband's app. He's an app developer. I do a lot of customer support emails. And I can tell you firsthand how wonderful it is to have canned responses. I have an Evernote notebook that has 84. I just looked at it. Has 84 different notes in it for different canned responses that I've collected over the years. And B, having an imaginary third party that's innocent and has no idea what they're doing can be very helpful in sticky situations. When we get particularly nasty customers, because this happens sometimes, then Becky responds to them, and Becky is happy and has just the cheeriest attitude and wants to be so helpful and approaches things from a very basic standpoint and just wants to make sure that everybody's happy. And Becky is me, but that's not my normal persona. So she comes in handy sometimes. And the other thing I was going to add about canned responses is it saves you so much time, because all you have to do is copy, paste, and customize a little bit and send, and it's done. You don't have to sit there and compose every email from scratch.
And I think you mentioned it. I think Leela Barker said something like, basically, Katie Hunt said.
Katie Hunt, yeah.
Sorry, Katie. Katie Hunt said something like, basically, in her business, if something occurs twice, that means there's a pattern and a need to write something for that, basically.
Yeah, I was just listening to her podcast the other day, and she said that, talking about systems.
Yeah.
Okay, so another thing that you can do to deal with customers that think they're right but aren't actually is to make sure that you polish your policies. So you want to make sure that your return policies, shipping policies, custom order policies, anything that relates to how you run your business is set in advance. And that if you do that, then that enables you to stick to your guns a little better, because you have a place to redirect your customers to. So one of the things we talked about why a customer might not be right is because they didn't read completely or they didn't pay attention. If you have your policies posted in a public space, if you can point them back to the emails that they received, that gives you a stronger argument for your case that it's not actually your fault that they didn't pay attention to the return policy, that it's been posted and that's how it goes.
For sure. I don't know if I have anything to add to that.
Policies.
Policies. They're important. They're important, especially just so that you can stick to your guns on something and be consistent with everyone and not be afraid of like, well, I did it for this person and now I need to do it for everyone or something like that too. Mm-hmm. You can just say, nope, this is our policy. Sorry, ma'am. Becky can tell them, nope, this is our policy. Sorry. Communication is key. Well, I think obviously this is important, and especially if you are doing custom work, to spell everything out as much as possible. I mean, I kind of feel like this goes with policies, but I think policies are usually something we think of as like something that just is like static and kind of stays on your Etsy page. But it's also something that can be internal. I think communication is like the explanation of the expectations with the customer and all those things. So make sure that you have return policies and shipping policies are very clear and specific. Like, this is why, and like, I'm getting that probably most of you aren't having lawyers create any of this stuff. But that's why like terms of service stuff is, in like tiny, like 1-point fonts when you go to click on stuff, when you're like on Facebook or signing a contract for something, because they have lawyers write up like literally every scenario. I mean, they also have some stupid stuff in there too, but you have to sort of account for the like level of human, I guess, like dumbness that comes with like working with the public, because like if you kind of don't cover your base on everything, there will be an instance where something happens where you're like, dang, I did not get specific enough on these policies. So I would say the more specific you can be, the better, so that people, you can just refer back and say, nope, this was clear. It is right here in our policies. I am sorry that you felt like you didn't need to read any of this before buying.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done that. I've definitely bought something on Amazon that the picture was of containers with lids, and the the post, the whatever the item to buy was actually just the lids, and so I got only lids in the mail. And as I was like, I got really angry, and I was like, this wasn't clear. And then I was like, I went back and I was like, though the photo was not just of lids, the actual listing was fairly clear that it was lids.
Yeah, an extreme. I mean, this can get a little extreme, but the other day I was searching for, I think I was searching for a watch band for my Apple Watch, and they come in all different shapes and sizes, and manufacturers all different prices too. And so I was like looking at like a $5 watch band, and the product photo had an Apple Watch in it, and they had like in big letters, "does not include Apple Watch." It's like, for $5,
exactly.
like, come on, for $5, who actually thinks it comes with an Apple Watch?
People think like $5 PDF patterns of a quilt will get you an entire quilt. So there are just some real knuckleheads floating around the internet.
Why? Because they aren't paying attention and they're not reading completely. So,
or sometimes they're actually trying to be scammy and be like, see how far they can push the limits of this. So
yeah, which is actually a really good point, because the next thing that we want to talk about is that not all apples are bad. So you're bound to have a bad interaction with a customer over the course of your handmade business. Don't let one bad interaction color your entire customer service attitude. Yes, there are sometimes people who will try to take advantage of you, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but that doesn't mean that everybody is. And if you approach things with your guard up all the time, being really paranoid that you're going to be taken advantage of, that's going to set you in the wrong place to actually help legitimate concerns.
Just let it roll off sometimes and be like, okay, this is a learning, but this doesn't mean I need to assume that all of my customers are going to be terrible people this way. It's like, well, maybe it's not exactly like it, but I just remember there were a few things, but I feel like in Rome, when I visited Rome, getting pickpocketed in Rome definitely made me feel like everyone in Rome was out to get me at some level. So, I mean, they weren't, and maybe probably more so than I should also be on alert, because it is a fairly pickpockety city. But it doesn't mean that like you can't still enjoy everything. Like everyone isn't out to get you. You just have to be a little bit more, I guess, like have like a nice air of suspicion. But don't let it completely jade everything, so that you don't, you can't just have normal interactions with customers, I guess, other people who aren't out to get you, because most people aren't out to get you.
Yeah, for sure. So that leads into the great next item, which is ask for advice. When people are trying to take advantage of you, or you're getting off the wall requests or really weird communications from your customers, ask for help, ask your peers, or pop into a Facebook group. That's the time to kind of crowdsource best practices, because maybe it's just a type of purchasing request that you've never encountered before and never thought to encounter, and other people have done it and it's been totally fine. Maybe it's a little scammy, like, I mean, we all know you don't ship things to Nigeria, right? Yeah, that's anytime your gut is kind of telling you something's not quite right, it never hurts to get a second opinion from a fellow handmade business owner.
Totally, especially because if it's a scam, usually other people have been sort of approached with a similar scam. So definitely go ahead and be like, hey, this is a little weird and different, and then also sometimes a lot of times something that you'll think is weird and different is actually like pretty normal. You're like, oh, actually, like I do that all the time. Like have other people be like, oh, I do that all the time with this kind of customer or whatever, especially when it's like dealing with wholesale. I feel like the rules for wholesale are usually different than the rules for just regular online customer interaction. You wouldn't do a lot of the things you would do in in wholesale that, you wouldn't do things in wholesale that you do things in wholesale that you wouldn't often do with just your regular Etsy customer, I guess.
Mm-hmm. I was going to add that, so there was something I was going to add that was related to that, and I lost my train of thought and I forgot it. So I'm going to shut up now.
Okay. While you're thinking of that is, this kind of goes along with the policies and everything, but knowing your limits on things. So like maybe kind of have some rules for yourself on like how many times you'll interact with a customer before just like shutting it down, or like giving them, just be like, this isn't worth my time anymore. You get it, just refund. Like it's just easier to just cut them off and whatever they need. So I would just have that sort of as part of your own like internal policies as to like how much customer service you can absorb, because that's time that you're not getting paid for. Basically, you're not a big box store. So figure out when you stick to your guns of like telling them no, and then when it's just becoming a headache to just be like, okay, like I'm just gonna let this one go. Those are things that only you can sort of decide, but, or just when that you're going to also just say, nope, no more. I'm not going to interact with you anymore. This is it.
Mm-hmm. In the app customer service world, our kind of rule of thumb is if somebody comes at us really angry and starts like threatening to leave a nasty review if they don't get a feature request, or if they if they are really, really pushy about something, we just show them the door and say, you know what, you bought the app based on the features it offered at the time. If you want to request a refund, here's how to do that.
Especially the app is like what, $4.99 or something?
$10.
It's $10. Whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's not like, this is not a make or break situation.
Yeah, and when we've had to actually break down for people too sometimes when they're like, I paid $10 for this. I'm like, yeah, Apple took $3, taxes took another $2.50, so we get $4.50. And you just wasted that by my hourly rate and the time it took to respond to you. You're done.
Yeah, totally. And not even that. It's like you're paying for something that's $10 and think of all the value you're getting for that. I mean, at some point you're just like, get out of here nonsense. I don't know what crazy expectation you had.
It's perfectly okay to say, bye, Felicia.
Totally. And the last one is that compromise is okay. Becky might need to come in on the compromise because sometimes it can be hard for us to do that ourselves. Sometimes compromising on something and finding a solution does not mean they're right. And I think we can sometimes confuse like personal arguments we might have with a significant other or a parent or a sibling as, you don't want to like cede ground with them sometimes because you like know you're right. If you felt like they wronged you in some way, this is not that. This is not what this is. This is you just trying to find a solution to move on with your business and to make it so that you are creating the least damage for your business, I guess, in general. So whether that is a customer that you can kind of just tell like all they want is a refund and they're just not going to let up, and maybe something you did you recognize was not totally accurate, or there was wiggle room that they're sort of exploiting something that was unclear. Sometimes it's just easier to be done with that. Obviously, when it comes to money, you don't want to get in the habit of like refunding everyone or like, giving discounts or whatever for everyone. But there's myriad ways I feel like to compromise with someone that doesn't necessarily mean completely giving them back everything from the sale that they just made.
For sure.
Think of airlines. They're like, here's credits towards things. Here's, for your inconvenience. And especially if it's not something that it's like, if it's obviously something clearly like you had a product defect or something like that, obviously that is something you want to fix and be more generous about, obviously. But if it's something like, the color was not exactly right, obviously you can offer a return, even though you might have said like color, varies by screens and it's not complete, it's a handmade item, so it's not going to be always consistent and the same. People still will be like, I wanted exactly what I saw in that photo. So there's ways to do that.
Yeah. So there's been some really great chat going on from the people watching, and something that Amanda just said reminded me of an 8th item that I would add to this, and that is strip away your ego enough to own up to your own mistakes, because that can be hard to get past. As if a customer calls you out for doing something wrong and you actually did it, it's easy to get defensive. I sometimes do that. I'm like, oh, Bob, I bent the thing. But sometimes you just have to, own up to it and say, you know what, I'm really sorry. That was my bad. I'm going to fix that for you. The key is just knowing when it is actually your fault versus something outside of your control, or something that's a mix of why the customer isn't always right.
And it's hard to do that sometimes, because what will often be a minor mistake on your part, the customer will come across sometimes as, this is like the singular injustice of all time or something, and you're just like, calm down. Like, this is not what you're trying to make it out. It's like, actually, so it's easy to get defensive because they will sometimes really blow it out of proportion. But if it's your mistake, you have to kind of just try to ignore how they've come across and just maybe let Becky handle that. In our poll, what's your relationship with customer service? I'm kind of surprised by this, which means I think we have more excellent customers than we have terrible ones. Most of you said your relationship with customer service is a love-hate thing, which I totally get, right? Like, sometimes you'll have a customer and they're just amazing, and people who, back and forth with you are just really excited about your product. And so it can be a pleasure to interact with them. It can also be annoying because they're, emailing you, they're messaging you through Etsy, they're emailing you, they're also messaging you through Facebook and Instagram, and you're like, can you just not be everywhere trying to ask all these questions? So, as many of you said, I love customer service as it's love-hate. So kudos to you who love customer service. I guess you're in the right line of work. And then we have one person for I could take it or leave it. Nobody hates it. So I think that's pretty amazing.
To be in.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any questions that have popped up yet. If anybody has any, or I know we've shared a lot of experiences in the chat, which is great. I hope you've learned from each other's experiences. But I think that's going to wrap us.
Mandy says, I've found acknowledging the person's feelings, thanking them for communicating and offering a solution is pretty efficient. I agree. Often you never even have to acknowledge a mistake. I totally, there's definitely, I am so sorry you feel that way. That was not our intent at all, blah, 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 whatever that is. So yeah, definitely, there are ways to acknowledge it. It sounds like you are really upset. It sounds like that is a bummer that happened. Especially if it's with a third party, because like there's literally like nothing you can do about most of that stuff. You weirdly do not control the USPS or UPS or FedEx or any of that, especially at the holidays. So you do not control the wandering package thieves that come around. There's so many things you do not control. Or the checkout process on certain things or whatever that they're having fussy issues about. So, yeah. Well, I think we kind of went a little late today.
A little bit. It's
a little bit late
to cover.
We did
next week.
a lot of ground.
Next week we are diving. I will not be here.
Who is this we? Who is this we?
Next week Sharon will be here. The royal we, Sharon. Sharon will be subbing in for me alone, all by her lonesome, because I'm working an event next week. She'll be giving you 5 tips for talking about yourself. And I think this is one of the things, I'll be honest, I'm bummed I'm not going to be able to participate in this one. But this is one of the things that I hear a lot from makers, especially from introverted creatives, is how hard it is to talk confidently about yourself or to tell your story. And so Sharon's going to have some really great tips for you for that. So make sure you are back for that. You are registered for this month, which means that you're automatically registered for next week. So you'll just want to come right back here and you'll get an email notification and join Sharon, not us. You and Sharon will all join each other without me.
Totally. Awesome. So we will see you guys all next week. Thanks for watching. If you didn't catch all of this, the replay will be up fairly shortly, within a minute or so after we're done here.
Awesome. Take care.